Welcome back, everyone. In today's video, we'll look at the workplace trap, the lie that keeps working people burnt out. We'll deconstruct something that's very common in the workplace, namely the perpetual temporary stress state, and briefly look at why waiting for the workload to drop doesn't help, because the workload isn't the problem. The interpretation of the demand is the problem. If you work in a demanding professional job, or manage a business, handle a high pressure career, are a professional caregiver, or work in any other environment that has stress, and let's face it, most of them do, you have almost certainly uttered these words: it's just a high pressure day or week. Once I get through this deadline, attend to that patient, or that customer leaves, things will calm down. And then the deadline does pass, the customer leaves, but instead of calming down, a new project lands in your lap. Another demand requires your time, and another unexpected crisis arises. And you find yourself saying, okay, now it's just a high pressure month. Once we get past this quarter, I'll finally manage to take a breath. This is the perpetual temporary stress trap. We treat chronic long-term overwhelm as a series of short-term emergencies. But why do we do this? Because it lets us believe that the problem is entirely external, that it's just the workload, the client, or the boss, and that if we just run a little faster, we'll eventually reach the finish line. But workload is rarely the root cause of workplace burnout. If you have a look at workplaces, you'll see people handling staggering amounts of work with complete mental clarity and calm. Then there are others who are entirely overwhelmed by a single task. The difference is often not the volume of work on their desks. The difference is how those demands are interpreted. We referred to this in the first video where two women were responding differently to the same source of stress. Let's have a look at this again. Imagine an urgent email arrives late at night, or you receive a message about something that you need to do. If your default script is to rush to attend to the email or the message or the request otherwise, and then you start imagining all sorts of dire consequences, your body enters a biological threat and overwhelmed state. Your heart rate rises, your muscles tense, and your brain's cognitive centers begin to freeze. But if your script is, this is an important request, but I'm currently off duty, I will acknowledge it first thing in the morning when I have the capacity. Your nervous system remains calm. What required your attention was identical to the other person's. What needed to be done was identical, but the biological cost to your body was entirely different. And this part of the event is well within your control. Workplace burnout happens when we treat every workplace demand as a direct threat to our security, our worth, or our survival. We run on adrenaline because we're constantly defending ourselves against an invisible threat. We tell ourselves we are working hard, but biologically, we're basically just running from a predator. If you want to break out of this workplace trap, you have to stop waiting for the workplace load to decrease. In the modern workplace, it really does. Instead, you must change how your mind processes and interprets those demands. You must learn to separate a tight deadline from a threat to your personal worth. You have the tight deadline here, you have your personal worth here. They are two separate things. Just the other morning, I read an article in The Economist about how you can train for a heat wave. One of the techniques is exposure therapy. You have to endure the heat to get used to the heat. This is like desensitization practice in psychology and related fields. For example, if you have a phobia about, let's say, birds, you face your fear little by little by being around birds. What this does is it helps your brain untrain the panic response and teaches your body that you're safe. What desensitization does for you is that it helps you to adapt to the situation. And for purposes of stress interpretation, it helps you interpret the source of the overwhelm differently. You will still find yourself in the heat wave, in inverted commas, but your response, in other words, your interpretation, will be different. The next time you feel a workplace demand triggering panic, use this two-step check-in. Step 1, identify your default threat script. Ask yourself, what am I assuming will happen if I do not handle this immediately or perfectly? Write down that automatic assumption. Step 2, recalibrate the scale. And as we did in the first video, choose where on a scale of 1 to 10 your interpretation is. Are you in actual physical or other danger? Or is it an annoyance, an irritation, an inconvenience that you have just learned to interpret as an all-out catastrophe? And what we have learned, we can unlearn. That's the good news. Once you do the recalibration, you'll see how it takes the edge off the demand. And in Tier 1 stress interpretation reset that you've heard so much about, we have a nifty tool to help this recalibration. And now, as we're halfway through the videos for this 6-part series, I wanted to remind you of the resources available to you if you're ready to do something with the overwhelm you feel, if you want a practical, structured way to reset your responses to pressure and stress. Please go to the links in the next slide and get a few things. First of all, the Paco Straws Emotional Stability Personal Check-in. This is a free resource. It's non-threatening, non-clinical. I then invite you to enroll in Tier 1. It's the digital program, the Stress Interpretation Reset. The cost is less than a visit to a hairdresser. It provides diagnostic tools, cognitive exercises, and my proprietary stress measurement grid to help you stop absorbing stress and start resetting your system. Also on the next slide is a link to the catalog of books under the umbrella of emotional stabilization for everyday women. Please have a look. So here are the links. The Paco Straws Emotional Stability Personal Check-in, Tier 1, the Stress Interpreter Reset, and the books. And please don't forget, if you have a podcast, a newsletter, coaching practice, or community for women focusing on things like resilience, burnout, confidence, emotional well-being, I'd love to contribute a guest article, an interview, a workshop, or discussion for your audience. Please contact me via the link in the slide. And thank you for watching. Take a deep breath as always, and I'll see you in the next video, which will address caregiver burnout.